Whether you're a mom who longs to talk to her kids about Jesus but doesn't know how, a church leader who wants to teach your families to take their faith personally, or simply someone who wants to see the church flourish in these trying times, the D6 Conference has the tools for you. Coming to Orlando and Seattle in 2025, with over 50 breakout sessions and presentations from Christian thought leaders, you'll walk away with fresh ideas, new perspectives, and a renewed passion for your ministry. At D6, we don't just talk about discipleship, we provide practical tools for you to turn these desires into actions. To register or learn more, follow the link in the description or visit d6conference.com.
Welcome back to the D6 Family Ministry Podcast. We believe that discipleship should not be difficult, so we're here to help you connect the dots between church and home. Together, let's guide each generation, whether related to you or not, to stand confident in their faith. I'm your host, Ron Hunter, and with me as always is Marianne Howard, our co-host. Hey, Marianne.
Hey, Ron.
Well, I have a thought here for you. And I'm not sure, but what this is going to bring back like some scarring or nightmares for some people in the audience. But what's your thought on lock-ins?
Oh, my stomach just dropped.
Oh, no.
Oh, I've served my time in church lock-ins and I'm done. I'm done with them. I'm never doing them again. I remember, doing a church lock-in in the church, up all night long, junk food, capture the flag in the dark. I mean, things that now, like, churches get sued for.
Yes.
Lock-ins are just horrible. But, our guest today, Tiger McLuen, he's a lifer. He's a youth ministry lifer, and he's got a heart for students. And today's interview, he's going to hit on some very important things for us to pay attention to. Listen to this take, and it's a different take on how he built these faith factors that he's going to talk about today. Listen to this clip real quick.
My intention with faith factors was to begin to start asking the question of those who hadn't left, 18 to 30-year-olds, who still were engaged in their faith, active in a church, believed in Jesus. And I started to just ask that question. What kept you in this?
Well, I think we're going to get a taste of what Tiger's going to walk us through. I'm going to give you an insight before we hear from Tiger, just to give credence to his voice. If there were a Mount Rushmore of youth ministry leaders, I believe Tiger's image would be on it, along with a handful of others, and that would be a fun exercise to decide who goes up there, but I think Tiger would be there. Let's listen in.
Right now, I am joined by Tiger McLuen. Tiger served in student ministry in the local church, oversaw the youth and family ministry programs at Bethel and Luther seminaries, and is now the executive director of Youth Ministry Consultants. YMC focuses on coaching and training ministry leaders, particularly those in smaller churches who are often undertrained and under-resourced. Tiger, thanks for coming back.
It's great to be here. In addition to that little bio, I'm back on the ground, and in my home church, I'm the interim director of student ministry.
Oh.
So I'm taking a lot of the ideas that I've done in seminars and I'm living them out. I'm trying to test the theory that you can't be too old and still be in youth ministry.
And I believe that 100%.
Yeah, I've always preached it. Now I'm testing it.
Yeah. And I've heard people say, well, I'm too old to connect with teenagers. But if you have a heart for teenagers, then yes. And you've got the experience under your belt. You've been teaching this, and that's so cool to see you're back doing it again.
Yeah, so this year has been really fun. I even survived my latest lock-in last month.
Okay. Have you recovered?
Barely. Yeah.
Yikes. I will not complain about being tired if you've been done that. I've heard people say if you want to survive in youth ministry, don't do lock-ins. So you're putting that to the test too.
Well, that's right. I used to say I loved the lock-ins when I was in my 20s, and then I started to believe that lock-ins were from the devil. But now I'm somewhere else. But it's been fun.
Well, today we're talking about rethinking student discipleship and looking at faith factors for a faith that lasts. I know you've done some research on this topic and you've really looked into this, and you've talked to hundreds of young adults who have not left the faith.
Yeah.
In the conversations, what are the things that have really stood out to you about those who did not leave?
Well, I think the thing that was most exciting to me is just I shifted my thinking from the kinds of books and articles I was reading about the reasons why people are leaving. And when the statistics are depressing. 1 million students will leave the faith every year is what we hear now from the Fuller Youth Institute and others. 40 to 60% of kids that go to church now won't go to church in 10 years. Those things are real, they're vital, they're important, and I listened to the reasonings behind that, articles or books where they would interview people who left and they would point out the weaknesses of the church. My intention with Faith Factors was to begin to start asking the question of those who hadn't left, 18 to 30-year-olds, who still were engaged in their faith, active in a church, believed in Jesus, and I started to just ask that question. What kept you in this? What stood out was the consistency around the kind of factors that the 7 of them that I talked about, and the 2 bookends in particular, are not brand new. It's kind of a visual I have of the 7 on a bookshelf, and the 2 bookends are not brand new. But in the conversations, I resonated how important they are and how critical all of these factors are. So it was just the process of listening to those who hadn't left that kind of got me leaning into it with a little more passion.
Well, I know you do a lot of work with smaller churches. When talking to young adults, did you notice any differences between the young adults who came from smaller churches and those who came from larger churches?
You know, that's a great question, because the smaller church focus for me has been in the last 8 to 10 years. I taught at 2 different seminaries, which provided a master's degree in youth ministry, and I, like almost all national organizations, inadvertently ignore the small church, because none of us can make money on a small church. They won't buy enough stuff. They won't send them to the conference. They won't buy enough curriculum. They won't bring in our paid big speakers. And so our organization was providing a master's level youth pastor. Well, who's going to hire a master's level trained youth pastor? It's a medium or large church. Yeah. My last 4 or 5 years there, we started doing conferences in Fargo, Green Bay, Duluth, and Iowa. All of a sudden, every church that came, except the host church, was from small churches. And I started listening to their stories. And so the research that I did was not based on, I didn't pull out small church, large church back then. Now I'm paying more attention to it. But there are some things that small churches can do naturally. What I think the Faith Factors is important for me to do is to say to any size church, you can go after these factors. None of these require size. I didn't notice anything because I wasn't paying attention to it at the beginning about large church, small church. Now I am, and I'm doing it more in an encouragement to small churches. When you see this list, none of them are out of your reach. Whereas sometimes you go to conferences if you're in a small church, and they name a program, they go, well, I can't do that program. I can't have 500 people in a room to have the energy to do that thing. You know, I'm lucky to get 8 people in a room.
Yeah.
So I didn't notice anything on the front side because I wasn't looking for it.
Yeah.
But now I'm trying to use it to encourage small churches, because as I look at them now, they're all doable.
Well, I want to jump right into these faith factors, these 7 faith factors that you have that help build a faith that lasts. Before we go to a break, we'll tease a little bit here, but can you share the first 3, and then we'll come back later and talk about the next 4, but I'd love to hear the first 3 faith factors.
Okay. And as I do that, I'm going to say, I always have to say this is not a formula. Sometimes we hear this kind of stuff and we think, well, if I get 6 of those, we're good to go. If I get 5 of those, I don't think any of these guarantee anything. As a parent, I think we need to be more intentional. I know that everybody who's listening, everybody who works in a church, every parent, every grandparent is hoping that their kids turn out well and follow Jesus. I know we all share that hope. I have a phrase I say a lot, and that is, hope is not a strategy. God bless you for the feeling, but we got to be more strategic, especially in this world. So the seven are, and again, I'm working more on a visual now of a bookshelf of 7 factors. And the first one is going to be no surprise, especially here at D6, and that is, guess what? Family of origin. That's the number one factor that comes up in our conversation with people. What kept you there? I had a grandparent. I had a mother. I had a father. I had mother and father. I just spoke at a university retreat, and I asked the faith factor question. Now I'm doing it to try to correlate, and 92% of the students there said that was their number one faith factor, family of origin.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean if they don't have a family of origin, they're doomed. Again, no formula, because when I graduated from high school, I had probably half a faith factor. And I'm following Jesus now, still a long time ago. But many of the factors came after I graduated, after I came to know Jesus. But family of origin is number one. It's a big deal. I call it the uncontrollable variable. You can't make this happen as if you're a youth worker, if you're a person in the church. But it really is powerful. So work on it, build it, keep learning everything we can about helping that family, because it makes a big difference. The second one is what I call sacred memories. What I mean by that is I listen to the stories of people, and they would say, at camp, God showed up, or on a mission trip, or when my grandma got cancer, and we rallied around her. God, that experience, that subjective reality that God breaks through from intellectual to experiential. And I listen to the stories of people who are following Jesus, and we all have sacred memories. They're sealed by the Spirit to remind us of God's faithfulness in our past, so that when we're in our present struggle, we can pull up. Why does the Bible say over and over and over? Remember. Remember what God has done. Remember his faithfulness. Remember how he was a refuge in this. That's because we're forgetful people. And so sacred memories is that anchor place for a lot of us. And so my contention with people in the church is we can't make this happen. This is only a work of God. What our job is to set the table, is to get them places where God can break through, where they're out of the ordinary, where they are not on their phone, they're at camp, they're on a retreat, they're on the mission trip, they're in a service project, they're in a small group, they're in a Bible study, whatever it is, because I'll never know when God will use that particular thing. And the small church can do this just as well as the large. Because I listen to stories that people say it was my Sunday school teacher, 82-year-old Sunday school teacher who met with me every week.
Yeah.
And she's the reason why I'm still in church. It doesn't require program or skill. It just requires God using that particular thing. So sacred memories, I love listening to sacred memory stories because they remind me of the varied ways that God works. And it's why I keep doing the stuff I do, because sometimes God shows up in the strangest corner. I just got somebody here at this conference came up to me and had a little message from at the time, a 17-year-old kid who was at a conference I spoke at in 2017. And he said, God used that talk you gave to change my spiritual life. And I told him back in a video, that's why I keep doing this, because I'll never know. That was how God used me in a talk, which is old school, and yet it works. So sacred memories. The third one is authentic community. The 3 key questions every kid asks is, who am I, which is identity, whose am I, which is belonging, and do I matter, which is purpose. And this one gets after belonging. If I listen to the stories of people when they felt they found a place where they belonged, and for some of them it was because they didn't belong anywhere else. For others, they belonged other places, but this is the one that met a new need for them. We talk about peer pressure, peer community, but it's nothing profound in any of these 7. But when you put them together, the power of a safe place where a young person feels valued, feels cared for, is with their friends. That's really, really important. And again, what I'm learning now is size of youth group doesn't dictate that this is happening. Large groups sometimes struggle with this one.
Yeah.
Because it's about being in the building. But They can do this well if they are intentional about it. And small churches, by definition, sometimes struggle with it because there's not enough variety of relationships, and so some kids don't feel connected. Everybody has to work at it, but that place of safe, peer-oriented relationships is a huge part of this story. I heard from people that's why they're still in churches, because they found it, and it meant a lot to them because they're figuring out, who am I, whose am I, and do I matter? Mm-hmm. And a group of friends, I always say, people grow spiritually the most when they're surrounded by people who are growing spiritually. It's not rocket science.
Yeah.
And so when kids are in a group that's starting to have traction around their spiritual life, it helps them gain traction in their spiritual life.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue talking with Tiger, and we're going to look at the other 4 faith factors for a faith that lasts. We'll be right back.
Let's face it, the reason why you're listening to this podcast is the daunting challenge of discipling the next generation. Many of us wonder if we're even equipped to lead young people in this faith journey. Discipleship is Leadership, the latest book from Dr. Rich Griffin, provides the tools and the insights you need to disciple children and youth in your home and ministry. Grounded in the most reliable psychosocial developmental theory available, this book offers practical guidance that's totally surrounded and undergirded with scripture for parents, ministry leaders, and mentors alike. With real-life stories and biblical examples, Discipleship is Leadership simplifies the disciple-making process while empowering you to lead with confidence. If you're ready to disciple young lives through intentional leadership, grab your copy today. To purchase or learn more about Discipleship is Leadership, follow the link in the description.
We're back, and we're talking to Tiger McLuen, and we've been discussing how we are rethinking student discipleship and looking at faith factors for a faith that lasts. Before the break, you shared with us 3 of those faith factors. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to just go take a deep dive into all 4, but could you kind of give us a brief synopsis of the other 4 faith factors that are still there?
Again, on the bookends in the middle is not a surprise, biblical knowledge.
Yes.
Knowing the Bible. People would tell me stories of how they learned the Bible as a child and as a teenager, how they learned to study the Bible on their own, how their youth and youth group helped them provide a place where they could grow in their knowledge of the Bible, memorize verses, whatever style they use. The style of this one was different across the board, but they kept coming back to the Bible became part of a way for me to talk about remembering promises in the scripture, remembering truths in the scriptures. So raising biblically illiterate teenagers is a problem in our church right now.
Yeah.
Because what'll happen is if you say, let's do a Bible study, 9 times out of 10, you won't have teenagers go, yes. And so we sometimes acquiesce to that, but we may change our methodology, but we can't change the content. We're still people of the scripture. Mm-hmm. We're still people of the word, and we need to be intentional, I think, more creative about how to teach that in ways that apply to their lives. And so that's a big, how to do that is a learning curve for every one of us, but it's still a critical piece. So knowledge of the Bible. The 5th one is what I call engagement. What I mean by that is I listen to the stories of people who where their faith moved from consumer faith to discipleship, from attendance to engagement. And they talked about ways in which the church helped them with that, when maybe they gave them opportunities to serve, and they started to believe God could maybe use me. It isn't just, sadly, discipleship in some churches is built on attendance only. And I'm all for attendance, but that is not necessarily a correlation to long-time faith.
Right. Yeah.
And so what we're seeing here is engagement goes from that just coming to youth group, just being regular, to being actually their faith starts to engage with their real life. And it can be engagement in the church, it can be behind the scenes, it can be actual leadership opportunities. I always encourage church to stop and ask a simple question. Could a student do that? and see where that takes you. Could a student help in welcome greeting? Could a student do communion? Could a student lead worship? Could a student run PowerPoint? We sometimes forget to ask that simple question. And what people have told me is when someone did that for them, it opened a door of their faith. Because the key behind that is someone has to believe in them.
Yeah.
And don't we all want to be believed in?
Absolutely.
And so that was a huge one, engagement. The fifth one kind of caught me by surprise, or the sixth one, and that is it was searching. It's what I mean by that is it's a safe place to wonder and struggle. What they identified was all of this stuff was good, but there are parts of the journey through adolescence where it's confusion reigns, or doubt rears its head, or failure is present. What they identified, many of them said, it was when my church proved itself to be a safe place when I messed up, or when I wasn't sure anymore, or when I didn't have the right answer, that they loved me. They gave me a safe place. Yeah. That was one that caught me a little bit off guard.
That's interesting.
And but as part of the story of the factors. And then the last one is, again, no surprise, the bookend. It's caring adult mentors not in my family. Huge number of people, and me included. My half of Faith Factor was that. And if by the time I end my freshman year, that was a huge one, as well as Sacred Memory. But it's caring adults, try to train our volunteers. And what I heard was not all of them were the youth pastor or the director of youth ministry. It was sometimes a volunteer. Sometimes an old volunteer, which is encouraging to me these days. When the scripture in Psalm 78, I think it says, when I'm old and gray, I will still communicate the word of God to the next generation. I think that's a challenge. And I think people my age and older need to take it more seriously, that they can be an influence, they can be a faith factor without ever being the small group leader or the youth pastor or go on a overnight lock-in. In the hallway, churches, this is where small churches can do it really well, that the natural intergenerational connections, where all of a sudden someone starts to engage, remember their name, ask them, pray for them. That can be a huge factor.
Yeah, I just I felt like everything just came full circle. From at the beginning, you talked about how you've kind of gone back into the trenches. You're now doing this. Yeah. And then you ended by talking about a faith factor, is that they have that influence from caring adults who are outside their family. Yeah. That's exactly like what you're doing. Yeah, you've gone back into that. And I love that. And I think that is making a difference. And I think that set a great example for our listeners and other people. And you don't have to go into full-time ministry. No. You don't have to be on staff, but take an active role in the lives of our teens and our young adults. As we close, I know we probably have parents and youth workers listening to this. They're worried about where culture is going. They hear about deconstruction happening. They worry, could this be my kid? Could this be a kid in my youth group? Can you offer some encouragement to both parents and youth workers in their discipleship efforts?
Yeah. At the end of every seminar, I find myself saying three things, and I would say it here to everyone who's listening. One is trust the process. We're so product-oriented. We want to find the thing that will guarantee that our kids won't wander or that our youth ministry will be successful. I've learned over the 50 years I've been hanging around the next generation is you have to trust this process. If you're a parent, trust the process of loving them every day in the mess, trying something. If you're in church work, to keep going out, keep meeting in a small group, keep saying hi to them in the hallway, keep praying for them, keep remembering their birthday, whatever it is. Trust the process, and that ties to the second thing, which is going to sound really basic, which is something is better than nothing. Well-intentioned people who get frozen because they don't think they're doing enough tend to do nothing. And I've learned something. In the hands of God, something is better than nothing.
Yeah.
And that something might be as simple as remembering their birthday and saying, hey, Sarah, it's your birthday. I just prayed for you today, and I'm sending you a note. Don't underestimate what that might do in the life of a teenager who's struggling with, does anybody care? That day, that might be the sacred memory they have. I listen to people say, my 83-year-old Sunday school teacher was so powerful, So trust the process. Something is better than nothing. A phrase I stole years ago, a little bit longer, always believe in the significance of the insignificant. I love significant moments, powerful things. where it's clear to everyone that God was present and we're part of something big. But most of my life has been boringly ordinary. As a dad, as a grandpa, as a friend, we don't have a lot of woo moments, right?
Yeah.
And if we wait for those, we miss the chance to celebrate the small, to celebrate the fact that we don't know what we're doing sometimes, and God's in the midst of that. And what the stories of these people did is encourage me to keep leaning into what feels small, because it, in the hands of God, can be exactly what a young person needs. And that's kept me going. And I want to keep celebrating the significance of the insignificant.
I love that, because I feel like it takes a lot of pressure off of us.
Yeah.
We don't have to reinvent the wheel or go over the top. Sometimes it's in the small, daily, insignificant, boring things that the biggest changes are made. I appreciate you sharing these things. I appreciate just what you've done. You've spent much of your life training students, loving students, and you have not stopped doing that. And I appreciate that a living legacy is what you've done. And I know that people are teenagers, young adults today are better for that. So
I hope so.
Thank you so much for sharing this, and thank you for being here today.
Yeah, it's great to be here. God bless you.
Okay, Marianne, we've heard this wisdom, this sage wisdom from Mount Rushmore voice here. Of the 7 faith factors, is there any one of those that you've seen play out uniquely in your kids' lives?
Oh, man. Well, you and I talked about this off the air, and so I'm going to try to make it through this without getting emotional, but I have a senior in high school, and it's a tough year. As a senior, you're checking out, you're ready to be an adult, but you're not quite ready. And so, this is a tough year for Xander, my oldest, and he's a remarkable young man. But it's messy this year. And it has been so incredible to watch the adults at our church practice the searching safe place to wonder or struggle, and that there's faithful adults around him. He's a PK, and there's a set of expectations that come with that. But I like that he's able to walk into that church every week, messy, questioning, wondering, and they're loving and listening. And they've created a safe place for him. And, Ron, I told you this already. Those adults are shaping how he views church when he graduates in, 6 months from now. Yeah. And so I just cannot agree more with Tiger McLuen and his take on these 7 faith factors. Were there any that stood out to you for your family?
Oh, there were. Without a doubt, that origin, the safe place, the others. But I'm going to turn this back around to our audience. I want you to either look back at your notes or maybe re-listen and have a discussion between you and your spouse, or between you and the teacher, the small group leader of your kiddos, and just have an open discussion about one of the faith factors that Tiger's talked through. That's the whole point of our podcast, is not so much what's going on in our lives, but how this can manifest in your life and help and equip you to connect those dots, as we always say, between church and home.
That's right. And I just want to encourage you to celebrate the small, just like he ended with at the end of this interview. Celebrate the small, see where God is at work in the small, mundane things. I am excited about our interview next week. Dr. Stephanie Klein, she is going to share with us about spiritual disciplines in the home, and her take is very unique. It is a very, very good interview. So I'm excited about next week. Thank you for listening. To learn more, visit d6family.com, and we look forward to seeing you next week.